read books instead of my name presents The Room on the Roof by Ruskin Bond.
Chapter 5. In the early morning, when it was still dark, Ranveer stopped in the jungle behind Mr. Harrison's house and slapped his drum. His thick mass of hair was covered with red dust, and his body, naked but for a cloth round his waist, was smeared green. He looked like a painted god, a green god. After a minute, he slapped the drum again, then sat down on his heels and waited. Rusty woke to the sound of the second drum beat and lay in bed and listened. It was repeated, traveling over the still air and in through the bedroom window. Dhum. A double beat now, one deep, one high, insistent, questioning. Rusty remembered his promise that he would play Holi with Ranveer, meet him in the jungle when the beat the drum. But he had made the promise on the condition that his guardian did not return. He could not possibly keep it now, not after the thrashing he had received. Dhum dhum, spoke the drum in the forest. Dhum dhum, impatient and getting annoyed. Why can't he shut up? Muttered Rusty. Does he want to wake Mr. Harrison? Holi, the festival of colors, the arrival of spring, the rebirth of the new year, the awakening of love. What were these things to him? They did not concern his life. He could not start a new life, not for one day. And besides, it all sounded very primitive, this throwing of color and beating of drums. Dhum dhum, the boy sat up in bed. The sky had grown lighter. From the distant bazaar came a new music, many drums and voices, faint but steady, growing in rhythm and excitement. The sound conveyed something to Rusty, something wild and emotional, something that belonged to his dream world, and on a sudden impulse he sprang out of the bed. He went to the door and listened. The house was quiet. He bolted the door. The colors of Holi he knew would stain his clothes, so he did not remove his pajamas. In an old pair of flattered, rubber-soled tennis shoes, he climbed out of the window and ran over the dew-wet grass, down the path behind the house, over the hill and into the jungle. When Ranveer saw the boy approach, he rose from the ground. The long hand drum, the dholak, hung at his waist. As he rose, the sun rose, but the sun did not look as fiery as Ranveer, who in Rusty's eyes appeared as a painted demon rather than as a god. You are late, mister, said Ranveer. I thought you were not coming. He had both his fists closed, but when he walked towards Rusty, he opened them, smiling widely, a wide smile in a green face. In his right hand was the red dust, and in his left hand the green dust. And with his right hand he rubbed the red dust on Rusty's left cheek, and then with the other hand he put the green dust on the boy's right cheek. Then he stood back and looked at Rusty and laughed. Then, according to the custom, he embraced the bewildered boy. It was a wrestler's hug, and Rusty winced breathlessly. Come, said Ranveer, let us go and make the town a rainbow. And truly, that day there was an outbreak of spring. The sun came up and the bazaar woke up. The walls of the houses were suddenly patched with splashes of color, and just as suddenly the trees seemed to have burst into flower, for in the forest there were armies of rhododendrons, and by the river the poinsettias danced. The cherry and the plum were in blossom. The snow in the mountains had melted, and the streams were rushing torrents, and new leaves on the tree were full of sweetness, and the young grass held both dew and sun, and made an emerald of every dewdrop. The infection of spring spread simultaneously through the world of man and the world of nature and made them one. Ranveer and Rusty moved round the hill, keeping in the fringe of the jungle until they had skirted out only the not only the European community but also the smart shopping center. They came down dirty little side streets where the walls of houses, stained with the wear and tear of many years of meager habitation, were now stained again with the vivid colors of Holi. They came to the clock tower. At the clock tower, spring had really been declared open. Clouds of colored dust rose in the air and spread, and jets of water, green and orange and purple, all rich emotional colors, burst out everywhere. Children formed groups. They were armed mainly with bicycle pumps or pumps fashioned from bamboo stems, from which was skirted liquid color. And the children paraded the main road, chanting cheerily and clapping their hands. The men and women preferred the dust to the water. They too sang, but their chanting held a significance. Their hands and fingers drummed the rhythms of spring, the same rhythms, the same song that belong to this day every year of their lives. Ranveer was met by some friends and greeted with great hilarity. A bicycle pump was directed at Rusty, and a jet of sooty black water squirted into his face. Blinded for a moment, Rusty blundered about in great confusion. A horde of children bore down on him, and he was subjected to a pumping from all sides. His shirt and pajamas, drenched through, stuck to his skin. Then someone gripped the end of his shirt and tugged at it until it tore and came away. Dust was thrown on the boy, on his face and body, roughly and with full force, and his tender, underexposed skin smarted beneath the onslaught. Then his eyes cleared. He blinked and looked wildly round at the group of boys and girls who cheered and danced in front of him. His body was running mostly with sooty black, streaked with red, and his mouth seemed full of it too, and he began to spit. Then, one by one, Ranveer's friends approached Rusty. Gently, they rubbed dust on the boy's cheeks and embraced him. They were so like many flaming demons that Rusty could not distinguish one from the other. But this gentle greeting, come so soon after the stormy bicycle pump attack, bewildered Rusty even more. Ranveer said, "Now you are one of us, come," and Rusty went with him and the others. "Suri is hiding," cried someone. "He has locked himself in his house and won't play Holi." "Well, he will have to play," said Ranveer, "even if we break the house down." Suri, who dreaded Holi, had decided to spend the day in a state of siege and had set up camp in his mother's kitchen, where there were provisions enough for the whole day. He listened to his playmates calling to him from the courtyard and ignored their invitations, jeers, and threats. The door was strong and well barricaded. He settled himself beneath a table and turned the pages of an English nudist's journal, which he bought every month chiefly for its photographic value. But the youths outside, intoxicated by the drumming and shouting and high spirits, were not going to be done out of the pleasure of discomfiting Suri. So they acquired a ladder and made their entry into the kitchen by the skylight. Suri squealed with fright. The door was open and he had bundled out. His spectacles were trampled. "My glasses!" he screamed. "You have broken them." "You can afford a dozen pairs," jeered one of his antagonists. "But I can't see." You fools, I can't see. He can't see, cried someone in scorn. For once in his life, Suri can't see what's going on. Now, whenever he spies, we will smash his glasses. Not knowing Suri very well, Rusty could not help pitying the frenetic boy. Why don't you let him go? He asked Ranveer. Don't force him if he doesn't want to play. But this is the only chance we have of repaying for all his dirty tricks. It is the only day on which no one is afraid of him. Rusty could not imagine how anyone could possibly be afraid of a pale, struggling, spindly-legged boy who was almost being torn apart and was glad when the others had finished their sport with him. All day, Rusty roamed the town and countryside with Ranveer and his friends, and Suri was soon forgotten. For one day, Ranveer and his friends forgot their homes and their work and the problem of the next meal, and danced down the roads, out of the town and into the forest. And for one day, Rusty forgot his guardian and the missionary's wife and the supple Malacca cane, and ran with the others through the town and into the forest. The crisp, sunny morning ripened into afternoon. In the forest, in the cool, dark silence of the jungle, they stopped singing and shouting, suddenly exhausted. They lay down in the shade of many trees, and the grass was soft and comfortable. And very soon, everyone except Rusty was fast asleep. Rusty was tired. He was hungry. He had lost his shirt and shoes. His feet was bruised, his body sore. It was only now, resting, that he noticed these things, for he had been caught up in the excitement of the color game, overcome by an acceleration he had never known. His fair hair was tousled and streaked with color, and his eyes were wide with wonder. He was exhausted now, but he was happy. He wanted this to go on forever, this day of feverish emotion, this day in another world. He did not want to leave the forest. It was safe. Its earth soothed him, gathered him in, so that the pain in his body became a pleasure. He did not want to go home.